So it's kind of setting these little missions to just push a little bit further. That's what we do in training for the purpose of expanding our physiological barriers and our psychological barriers. And every time you do that, you're building mental toughness.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who wanted to be a marine biologist as a child, Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 34 of the Running for Real podcast. I am so excited you are here today. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. This is so cool that, you are choosing to listen to Running for Real over all the other running podcasts, all the other podcasts you could be listening to. If this is your first show or your 34th show, either way, I'm really excited that you are here. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, last week, we talked to Renee McGregor, and she was talking about orthorexia. And I don't know about you, but I realized just how common an obsession with healthy eating actually is in our culture. And it's kind of ruined our enjoyment of food in a lot of ways due to the judgment and the pressure that we feel. So Renee is really determined to make a difference and kind of change things about that. And if you missed that one, make sure you go back and check it out because it's really going to be an eye-opening episode for you. Well, and it definitely was for me. So today we're going to address another part of our minds, which is, our confidence, our belief in ourselves. But this time for racing, the part that's kind of important to us. I decided to take this episode and break it down. I wanted to ask Nicole, our sports psychologist, how to approach these pre-race nerves, how to approach the doubts we have during a race, those self-sabotaging thoughts that we have that just make us feel like we're not mentally tough. And finally, how to approach the beating ourselves up that we tend to do afterwards. We go through them all. We do it over and over again, but I wanted to break it down bit by bit, and Nicole did a great job with this episode. You're going to love her advice. So after a word from Body Health and V, we will be right to the episode. By now, you know me, and I pride myself on being honest. There are a few brands that I talk about more than Body Health, and there's good reason for that. Body Health Perfect Amino helped me recover through my toughest training segments and helped me get to race day fit and healthy. Use coupon code RUNNINGFORREAL for 10% off at bodyhealth.com. Are you ready to meet my running buddy? Because she wants to meet you. I'd like to introduce you, my friends, to V.
Hi, Running for Real listeners. I'm excited to finally meet you. I'm looking forward to telling you more about how I can help you later in the show.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast. I am really excited that you are here. I always love talking to people who can really help us with our mental training, mental toughness. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me, Tina. It's great to be here.
Oh, no, it's going to be great. And, there's so many, when I was looking through your kind of resume, I guess, there's so many accomplishments to your names. You've worked with professional athletes all over the world. And it's, difficult to kind of know even where to start with you because there's like a lot we could kind of talk about. But firstly, what made you decide to go for kind of working in the performance or the sports area rather than just kind of being a psychologist or being someone who just works with general everyday, situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually not one that I've been asked before, actually.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So I've been an athlete my whole life. Ever since I can remember, I'm pretty sure my parents had balls in the crib. It's just been something that I've always been really attracted to and something I've been passionate about in many different sports in many different ways. And I knew even in college, I knew I was going to do something related to sports, but I wasn't quite sure what that was. And as I found sports psychology, which is kind of a funky story if you're interested in hearing that, but when I found sports psychology, there was no doubt in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. And I really enjoyed the performance side. That's always been my love and my passion is performance and how do we get the most out of people and how can we maximize potential?
Yep.
And so I was so fascinated by it that I'm really fortunate to be able to say I get to do that for my job every day.
Yeah. And like, would you have thought that when you were younger that this is where you would have ended up? Or do you think, thought you would have got kind of disheartened or something along the way would have stopped you working with athletes you were determined all the way through?
Absolutely. I'm a pretty gritty individual. When I put my mind to something, it takes a heck of a lot for me to not do it. And so I think that's one of the things that's helped me be successful is there are a lot of obstacles along the way. It's not an easy job to do. And it's certainly many barriers are put in your path, but it just wasn't something that I was going to allow to hold me back. I knew this is what I wanted and I kept going for it.
No, that's great. And it's good to hear you kind of speak those same things that, you obviously teach with people you're working with, trying to get them to be, work through things and kind of figure out how you're going to do this and, stay mentally strong. So it's good to hear that you actually do it yourself throughout your life in everything that you do. And, you go all over the world, giving talks and trainings, on mental toughness to, athletes, coaches, business people, professional conferences. And one thing I was wondering and always kind of have wondered is there a big difference between the way that you give talks or trainings to those different groups? Like, do business people need something different, or is it generally people have the same issues but just slightly come out in different ways?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So I find that the basic principles of mental toughness are the same regardless of what your performance may be. So whether that performance is running, whether that performance is cycling, whether that performance is skiing, or whether that performance is in the boardroom or maybe in an operating room. We all have to perform every day. And the skills that I teach really help people maximize their performance, regardless of what that performance may be. So the basic mental skills are the same, but I do have to talk about them in a different context in terms of what does it mean in an operating room or a boardroom versus in a running race. And so, although the basic skills are the same, we talk about them a little bit differently and make sure they're applicable to whatever population it is that I'm working with at that time.
And then from that, the people, like, let's say you had, a businessman who was also a runner, does a lot of it kind of translate? And once it clicks in their head from one area, they kind of can apply it? Or do you need to still kind of give them more guidance within their context? Or different context?
Well, yeah, some people need a little bit more guidance, but honestly, most people are able to translate that because we are who we are, regardless of what environment we're in. Now, different pieces of our personality may come out more than others in different environments, but we still are who we are. And so a big part of what I do is that self-awareness and understanding of how you present yourself in situations, and a mindset prior to, giving a public talk in front of 5,000 people might be the same mindset as you're standing at the starting line at the Olympic Games. So it's really a lot more similar than people think. It's just being able to apply it to different contexts and different scenarios.
And what are the issues that you see most people kind of dealing with? Is it confidence, or what other things is it that most people kind of struggle with?
I love it. A pro athlete knows it right off the bat.
Yep.
So there are two things that people come to me for more than anything else. And I've been in private practice for 19 years now. And I can say without a doubt, regardless of sport, level of sport, gender, ability level, any of that, those two things are consistent in what people come to me the most for. And those two things are confidence and pre-performance anxiety, which those two things work together and they work against each other in ways as well. So typically when you're not feeling very confident, you're going to be pretty nervous before a race. It might be a little bigger or more than what you're ready or capable of dealing with in the moment, and vice versa. If you're not feeling very confident, you're probably going to be pretty nervous as you're standing at the starting line, getting ready to go. So I think that a lot of those things, they tie in together. They're not always related. There's not always anxiety when there's no confidence and vice versa, but typically they do tend to interact.
Okay. Well, I want to dive into, obviously confidence is going to kind of be a theme throughout this whole episode, but the pre-race anxiety you mentioned, or, pre-performance anxiety. So I want to kind of give two scenarios, and kind of, we have a lot of runners listening who they do struggle with nervousness, anxiety. And, I'm always reminding them that, like, your body doesn't know the difference. Like, it's just your head that's telling you that this is nerves, not excitement and all that. But let's say training has gone really well. They everything is kind of clicked together, but they still have that doubt of, like, can I actually do this? Or they feel they're going to mess it up because everything has gone so well. So something has to go wrong, right? So what kind of in that situation should someone kind of keep in mind if they are coming up to a race that's maybe in the next few weeks?
Sure. So the number one source of confidence, there are a lot of different sources, but the number one source is the one thing that we can't deny. And the one thing that we can always hang our hats on is preparation. Mm-hmm. So if you feel when you get to any competition, any performance, if you feel like you have prepared the best you possibly can, given the circumstances you've had. So maybe you were sick, maybe you're coming back from injury, there's different things going on. But if you look at your circumstances and say, I prepared the best I can to be ready for today, that's the best source of confidence you can have. And so a lot of that is relying on and depending on that preparation and knowing that you have that in your back pocket. And so that kind of feeds into a few other strategies that I'll use with athletes. And so I'll give you a few of them because I know not everyone responds the same to every strategy. And so I'm hoping that the listeners will be able to pull at least one of these that they'll like and be able to use. So starting with that preparation idea, I often tell athletes, I don't care who you are, what sport you do, how good you are. If you look for reasons to fail, you will find them. Mm-hmm. You're tired. You don't feel that good. Your body's not that good. Maybe your preparation isn't where you thought it would be. You're looking around at the other competitors and thinking how good they look, or, you've looked at their social media feeds and they're talking about how great they're feeling that day. But on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, I don't care who you are, what sport you do, how good you are. If you look for reasons to succeed, you'll find those too. And we often look for those reasons to fail without recognizing all of the reasons we have for success. So on that side of the coin, it can go back to preparation. It can say, yes, I am coming back from injury, but look what I have done and look how I have prepared. And I feel good about that. You can also look to what have you done nutrition wise? Have you done the right things nutrition? Are you hydrated? Have you slept well? Have you incorporated all of those elements that make for a good performance? And if you can answer yes to those, or even a majority of those, you can rest your confidence on, I do have a lot of reasons that I could succeed. It's not just about reasons to fail, but there are reasons to succeed. Mm-hmm. So that's one strategy that I will also give people. And that's more of a confidence building strategy. But again, when you build a little bit of confidence, you tend to manage your anxiety a little bit better. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love your strategy. And I use the same one of changing your perspective. A little bit of anxiety doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It could be excitement, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to feel butterflies in your stomach, whether those butterflies are related to something you're excited about or something you're nervous about. Yeah. So many times just changing your perspective of the situation can be helpful. With the butterflies, I often tell people butterflies are good. You just want them flying in formation. Mm-hmm. So how do we teach our butterflies to fly in formation? Well, there's a few different strategies for that as well. And one of them is kind of recognizing and being aware of your anxiety. But if everyone listening to this right now can take a minute and think back to maybe a really good performance they had, and then ask yourself, did I feel a little bit of anxiety before that performance? Did I feel some of those butterflies? Did I have to pee 20 times before I went? Were those symptoms there? And most people are going to say yes. Mm-hmm. And so what you can do then is recognize that anxiety's always been a part of your performance. So why is it a bad thing? So many times people are trying to, push the anxiety down, pretend it's not there, tell themselves to fake it till you make it. It's not really, all those strategies aren't really the best strategies sometimes. But if instead you recognize and acknowledge the anxiety and kind of treat it like an old friend and welcome it in and say, there you are. I've never done anything great without you being here. So glad you showed up today. Let's do this. So kind of choosing to work with it instead of trying to work against it. And many times for most athletes, the best athletes in the world, there's a lot of research that supports this. The best athletes in the world do have some pre-performance anxiety. Then it goes away once the performance starts, mm-hmm. or it's mitigated, or it just it reduces to an insignificant amount once the performance starts. Okay. And so kind of recognizing some of those things and valuing that place. I tell athletes as well, if you're not a little bit nervous, I'd be a little bit concerned about that, because then maybe we need to have a different conversation. Maybe it doesn't mean that much to you. Mm-hmm. And that's a different scenario. So why are we afraid of it? Why is it a bad thing? It's been there every time we've done something good. Welcome it in, acknowledge it, and work with it.
I love that. I love that. Such good advice there. And, everything Nicole said there, I know you guys listening can definitely put that into practice. And, it's something that we do fear, but as you're right, it absolutely helps us, in the grand scheme of things. And, firstly, before we kind of go on to what I was going to ask you, you kind of answered it a little bit, but the other side of training, if it hasn't gone well, but a lot of people that are in the community kind of talk about, I really want to hit this goal. For runners, it particularly is usually a Boston qualifier. I really want to hit this. I really want to do that. I really want to. And I'm always trying to tell them, like, I know you're trying to say to me how committed you are. And that's wonderful that you have done everything you can, but you're putting this like stress of it has to be today on you that is making you less likely to actually even do it. So maybe give your thoughts on that as the expert rather than me just being like, this is what's worked for me. Tell them like how, if someone has a specific goal, like a number that they need, why is it not necessarily good to focus on that exact number all the time before you go into a race?
Great question. And I absolutely agree with you that focusing on that outcome is not going to be productive. And that's not going to be the best way for most athletes to get there. So a lot of what I talk about with that and strategies for that start long before the race day. So as you're going into training, so we all have these goals. We're not going to not set the goals. I want to make this time. I want to make the Boston qualifier time, whatever it might be. It's okay to have that. But then what you do is you work back from that. And the way I encourage athletes to do that is through one question. And that question is how. So if it were to be, look where you are today, look where you want to be. And as you look where you want to be, say, how am I going to achieve that? And then maybe it's, okay, I run X amount of races in this time, right? So you're kind of taking a step backwards. And then, okay, how am I going to get that? How am I going to get that? How am I going to get that? And you keep asking the question, how, kind of peeling back the layers of the onion until you get to the core. And that final answer should be something that's very much in your control, that has to do with the process of getting better that you're going to do today. Mm-hmm. So how am I going to get where I want to be? Well, today's a rest day. I do need to rest. And I find athletes have a very difficult time with that rest day. Yep. It's really hard to wrap your mind around how that helps you and how that's going to help you achieve the goal when you think you should be out there running and improving those times. And so if you can really put it into perspective of, okay, this is how rest helps me. This is what it does for my body. Then today I'm choosing to rest because that's going to help me get to that goal. So you start with a big one, the big goal, whatever that might be. Ask yourself, how am I going to get there? 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 Keep asking that question until you get down to what can I do today that's in my control, that is an actionable item, that's part of the process of getting back to that larger goal. So that's where it starts in the training. And then when it gets to race day, and of course you have that number in your mind, that picture in your mind, and you want it really, really, really hard. You want it a lot, and then you try really hard to get it. Typically what that results in is a lot of body tension. You end up hitting the wall a lot sooner. Your run strides are less efficient. You're less effective. You're not getting as much push. You're not getting your stride length has been changed. And typically for most people, that results in a lot slower times than what they anticipated. Mm-hmm. And so again, you use the same idea, the same concept. You get to race day. This is it. I want to get there. I want it so bad. Again, ask yourself, how? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? So at mile 22, where do I want to be? At mile 18, where do I want to be? Kind of pulling yourself back into your race plan until it comes back into, I like to use the acronym WIN, what's important now. If I'm going to win, I do that through focusing on what's important now. And what's important now is I stretch, or I warm up, or I hydrate. What's important now is I get to that next tree. What's important now is I make sure I grab some water at this station. Whatever what's important now might be, the idea is that if you take care of what's important now all along the way, that's keeping your mind in the process of the race. And before you know it, that outcome takes care of itself.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. And then before we go on to the next bit, with that, someone's in the race, what's important now? Well, things are crashing and burning. What am I going to do now? This is all falling apart. Like how do they stay in the moment if things don't look like they're going the right direction?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So A very similar process. So again, if you feel like things are falling apart, typically what you're doing then is connecting what's happening now to the outcome. So there's no way I'm going to make it. There's no way now. My body feels like it's going to stop. I have 12 miles left, or whatever it might be, however many miles. And that's where your mind tends to go, is to that outcome. And so you're not going to be able to stop it in that moment from going to the outcome. But again, you say, I have 12 miles left and oh my gosh, I can't even do this right now. There's no way I'm going to make it. Then you ask yourself, but can I get to, and that's where you have to fill in the blank. So can I get to, maybe it's a spot, maybe it's a location, maybe it's a mile marker, or can I get to, I've had athletes who are hurting so bad that they just count 10 steps, and then count 10 more steps, and then count 10 more steps. But then being aware and recognizing and starting to expand their vision to say, after they've done 20, 30, 40 steps, wow, I'm a little bit further ahead than I was before. So what tends to happen mentally is once you get into that spot where your body really is physically in pain, you're not making this up. It freaking hurts sometimes. And so when you kind of get stuck in that pain in your mind, if you're a novice athlete, not a professional, maybe we should recreational, not professional. I don't know. You kind of have to decide for yourself kind of which category you fit into. But the more recreational novice athletes should really do more of a distraction type of technique and get their mind somewhere else for a short period of time until they kind of get that second wind, that second physiological charge, getting their bodies moving again. And that could potentially be even the what's important now, because then it just takes them away from the pain, right? But a lot of the research, that's called dissociation, but a lot of the research says that professional athletes actually associate more. So when they feel the pain, they go into the pain. They think about the pain. They relate to the pain. They love the pain. They kind of make themselves feel it and say, yep, there it is. And I'm going to keep pushing through anyway. And you have to be a pretty gritty individual to be able to do that, because most people are going to feel the pain and they don't want to go further into that. Are you kidding me? They want to stop. And so that's why they say, if you're the kind who really enjoys that pain and knows that what it's doing for you and you love pushing through it, then go into it, feel it, experience it, push yourself harder, and eventually you can push yourself through it. If you're not, then kind of take your mind to a distraction. I call them deliberate distractions. I don't know, count the trees, count the people, count the something, sing a song in your head, do something that makes you feel good. And those strategies, those techniques can potentially help you get through those moments of pain. And then you recognize, and typically when you recognize that you're pushed through a little bit, you tend to release some more endorphins in that moment, which is going to help you feel better, feel happier, and also help mitigate some of the pain, the physiological pain that you're feeling.
Okay. Helpful. Loads of good strategies there. And, you have to listen yourself to know which one is going to work for you. Maybe try out some different ones. I know, some of the listeners know this from me. Nicole, you don't know this, but some of the things I found helpful were, say I'm in mile 15. Am I doing the best I can for mile 15? Yes. Okay. That's all I can do.
There you go.
Or like, if I was really struggling, I would think of someone who had helped me along the way. Like the example I always use is my strength training coach. I would repeat, Drew made me strong. Drew made me strong. Drew made me strong. Because I knew that like thinking about what I had done with him to prepare myself for this moment was A, bringing myself into that moment, but B, kind of making myself just be distracted by thinking, rather than thinking about, oh, this pain, this hurts, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking about someone else and what they've done to help me. So
excellent.
But obviously it depends on the person. So try out what works for you guys, and hopefully one of those helps. And then finally, so what about if someone has had a lot of ups and downs in training, things have just continuously gone wrong? I don't even know if I can finish this race, but I really, really want this time. So I don't want to give up on the hope of it. What are your suggestions if someone has had a bit of a rough time and they have no idea really where this is going to go?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And actually, I think this answer is going to be applicable for everyone, even if that's not something that you've experienced. But I'm really big on connecting with your why. Why are you running? Why do you do this? Why do you put yourself in this pain? Because running hurts, right? So why are you doing this? And there again, you might have to peel the layers of the onion. The first answer might not be the real true answer, but oftentimes to really find your why, what I talk about is most people's why is something that they can't necessarily verbalize. They can't actually explain what that is, but they know it when they feel it because it hits them like in the pit of their stomach, right? It's this feeling, it's this sense of just amazement, this awe, this I can do this, but it's something deep in their gut. It's a feeling that you feel when you do something that you've pushed yourself through and you've done something that you're really proud of. Mm-hmm. That's your why. And I mean, here's an example I like to use for those of you who have a significant other. Why do you love your significant other? And people are going to start, oh, they make me a better person. Okay, that's what they do for you. Oh, they're really nice. Okay, that's who they are. Why do you love them? And most people, as you sit and think about it, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, it is this feeling that I get when I'm with this person that I don't get with anyone else. So that's the kind of why that I'm talking about. What is it in your gut why running? Why not something else? Why not play chess? I don't know, right? Why running? And for most people, you can connect with that feeling, even if you can't describe it. And so when times get tough, when training hasn't been good, when things are up and down, connect with your why. Because when you know, I mean, there's those famous quotes about why, but I think that they're really applicable is, when you know why you do what you do, you have more power to do it.
So true.
And then also when you know your why, you can bear almost any how. So you can get through a lot of stuff when you really connect with that gut feeling and work on finding it and continue pushing through when things get hard.
So do you recommend people maybe sit down a few days before the race and kind of really think about it, write it down, kind of make it very clear in their mind so that going into this race, they do know, where they're at, but they also know, like you said, how they're going to get there and why it matters?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And it should be something that's really personal to you. I mean, you can connect that to other people. Absolutely. A lot of things that I do for my kids. But why do I do that for my kids, right? Why do I love my kids? I can't describe that, but that is that gut feeling that I would do anything in the world to continue doing for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful and such a good way of looking at things. The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, we get a lot of people, and I'm sure you hear this over and over again. We get it in the running world, but I'm sure you hear it all over the place. People say, well, I'm not mentally tough. I just gave up. And they're kind of beating themselves afterwards. What does that even mean? And are people as mentally weak as they think they are? Or do people not realize that kind of everyone is in that same, mindset at a certain point?
Yeah, I'd say you're right on with all of those points. So I think most people are more mentally tough than they think they are. Most people don't give themselves enough credit. And one of the reasons for that is we are all our own biggest critics. We are all the ones who tear ourselves apart more than anyone else does. And we also, social media hasn't really helped us in that regard, because we can look at social media and anyone can present themselves any way they want to on social media. And so it kind of lends us to comparing our worst days with everyone else's highlight reels, which may or may not be true. But yet that's kind of how we see it. And so we kind of put ourselves we start ourselves on a lower level than where we see most other people. And that's certainly not helping us. And so part of it is recognizing that everyone's struggling with something. Everyone, every single person in this world is struggling with something, whether or not that's public information. And so your struggles are not necessarily greater than anyone else's. They're not necessarily bigger. It's everyone is managing their own challenges. And so kind of keeping that in mind, we all have something regardless of how we present ourselves. I think that's an important concept.
Would it help you then with that to look around in a race and kind of see, look at other people's faces and see, well, they look like they're struggling too? Or would that not help you?
Yeah, that's a very individual question. I think for some people that could help, but for other people, it's kind of going into yourself and saying, yeah, I'm struggling, but you know what? I've made it through some struggles before. Whether that's, if you're in the middle of a race and you're thinking specifically about other races that you've struggled through, or I've even had runners I've worked with in the past who've connected with difficult life events and said, you know what? If I could make it through that, I can get through this. Yeah. But another thing I really want people to be aware of is just because you quit in a race doesn't mean you're a quitter, doesn't mean you're a loser. It just means at that moment in time, it wasn't working out the way you wanted it to, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't go back and tackle that race the following year or something similar. what I often will tell people is ask yourself, what did you learn from that? What was that experience for you? Did you learn that maybe you did quit a little too soon, which means you had more in the tank than you thought? Okay, the next time you go out, push past that mile, whatever mile it was that you quit. Obviously you have the goal of finishing the race or whatever it might be, but let's start with just pushing past that mile.
Yeah, that's good.
And many times when you find you push yourself past that mile, the rest of the race, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's not as difficult as you maybe thought it could be. And you do end up finishing. So it's kind of setting these little missions to just go a little bit further, just push a little bit further. That's what we do in training for the purpose of, expanding our physiological barriers and our psychological barriers and things like that. And as we continue to push past those barriers, that's mental toughness. Every time you do that, you're building mental toughness. But here's the key. Most people, when they push through something really hard or they accomplish something they haven't been able to for a while, will kind of do a shoo. Oh, wow, I'm really glad I did that. I got lucky. I hope I can do that again someday. The key is to say, whoa, I just did that. That was me. I totally did that. Yes. Okay. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting tougher. So instead of kind of being surprised about it, reward yourself for it. Acknowledge the fact that you just did that. As hard as it was, you just did that. And that's how you continue to put more money into your mental toughness bank.
Do you think writing down how that feels afterwards, like to, explain to yourself how that felt so that you can read it in future helps? Would that be something that would be good to do after that?
Absolutely. And those of you who are not writers and don't like to journal, record it into your phone, talk about it into your phone, save it on your voice memo, and go back and listen to it when you're struggling the most. Or it's best to have it in your own words, hear your own voice, read your own words, but at the very least, tell someone about it who can regurgitate that to you when necessary. Yep. But it's a much stronger effect if you write it down or if you record it and listen to it when you need it the most.
Okay, great. Thank you. So helpful. And I'm always telling people to do that, but I didn't know if that was actually the right thing to do. But good to hear you say it.
Absolutely. Well, if you think about it, we often remember our worst failures and we can replay those, play by play. But when people ask you to recall your greatest success, it's kind of like, I remember that it felt really cool, but I can't give you the play by play.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
You should be able to. You should celebrate your success just as much as you beat yourself up for your failures.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then related to that, when we are struggling in a race or afterwards or whenever it may be, often we kind of try and fight it with aggression. You might say, oh, I can't do this anymore. And you're like, yes, you can. And you kind of get aggressive towards yourself. Like, stop being a wimp. Like, why are you so pathetic? Like, we're so aggressive and cruel towards ourselves. Does that typically help someone? Or I'm always telling people to be kind to yourself. And I know that for me that works, but is it the case with everyone? Or how does aggression versus kindness play into things?
So it's not necessarily what you say to yourself, but what it means to you. Okay. So, we can classify that self-talk as being a positive self-talk. I got this, I can do it, versus negative, you suck, you can't do it, that kind of stuff. But it's really the feeling and the meaning behind it. So if you find that you're saying to yourself, come on, pick it up, you can do this, quit being a wimp, or whatever it might be, but that's a very motivating and a very powerful feeling for you, then absolutely you should do that. Absolutely. But if that kind of holds you back a little bit and it feels very aggressive, the word you used, then that might not be the best thing necessarily. So it's really about what does it do for your mentality in that moment? And does it build you up and encourage and motivate you to push through or not? And the key is finding what it is that's going to build you up and encourage you to push through. And sometimes it's being nice to yourself and sometimes it's really pushing yourself. Mm-hmm. But I will say a lot of the research is showing that talking to yourself in the third person is the most powerful, whether you're really encouraging yourself and being nice or you're being a little more aggressive. So saying, you got this, you can do this, you should quit being a wimp, or saying nice things to yourself like, you can, it's okay. It's just keep pushing through. You can do this. When you say you, it's kind of like this third party outside of us. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, because we are our own worst critics, if we're saying, I can do this, that doesn't feel as powerful to us as you can do this. Yeah. Not sure why, but I know that's what a lot of the research is showing. And I know many of the athletes that I've worked with over the years can testify to that as well. I know I used that as well. It was always you. And as soon as I started saying, I suck, usually those were those negative statements that I was holding myself back with.
Yeah. Oh, so true. And I completely agree. I mean, a lot of the listeners know that when I'm in my races, I imagine my husband is alongside me on his bike and he's saying, come on, Tina, like not saying,
that's right.
It's come on, Tina, come on, babe, like what things he would say to me. So yeah, definitely agree with that too. All right. And then finally, third part after a race, runners, well, I guess people in general, but particularly the kind of people that runners are, have a tendency to like beat ourselves up, wonder about the what ifs and just can't seem to let go of the moment and make peace with it. What is your advice for people in that situation who are just struggling to move on?
Right. Well, I don't think there's anything bad about looking back at a race or a performance and kind of picking out where you didn't do well, because at some point we are not going to improve if we don't know where we're messing up. Right. And so there's definitely value in doing that. But you should also look at the other piece of it and say, well, what did I do well? And another key of that is, what did I do to make that go well? So oftentimes when people find they're really negatively self-evaluating and they're kind of stuck in that negative self-evaluation cycle, I will have them do 3 things a day. I call it the 3 things a day exercise. And so whether it's a training day, whether it's a rest day, whether it's a competition day, whatever the day it might be, writing down 3 things that went well that day in one column, and the second column, what you did to make that thing go well. So, for a lot of athletes, it's a really big deal when they get a compliment from the coach, especially the elite level athletes I work with. Those are kind of hard to come by. And so when coach says you did a great job today, that's really, wow, whoa, cool. Makes me feel really good, right? But you got to know what you did to make that thing go well. Why did coach give you a compliment? What was it that you did? And so the first column of 3 things that went well today are things that just kind of make you feel good about yourself, things that you can be proud of. However, that second column of what you did to make that go well are actionable behaviors. They're items that you can repeat. They're things that you can consistently do that will then reinforce and encourage more positive associations and more positive things going well. So it's like, man, I really screwed up over here, but I did these things well. And if I continue doing these actions that made these things go well, that's where I'm going to find my improvement.
So would that be something like I practiced my nutrition and my stomach was fine? Is that something? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. My stomach felt good today. Okay. Absolutely. Because my nutrition, because I had everything dialed in. So what that means is if I want my stomach to continue doing fine, I'm going to continue dialing in my nutrition. And that nutrition piece is 100% in your control. So the idea is finding those behaviors, those items that are 100% in your control that you can do something about every day. And as you consistently do those things that are in your control, this is going to take us back to the beginning of the conversation and beginning of the race. You're going to find a lot more confidence. You'll feel a lot more calm. Your pre-performance anxiety will be under control, and that's going to lend itself into performance and then your evaluation afterwards. So you can see how the cycle just continues. It starts to spiral upward, where most of us can connect with spiraling downward, but not necessarily spiraling upward. And that's kind of where you can find some of those strategies to start spiraling upward with your mindset, which then obviously has a positive impact on performance.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really helpful. And then, so related to, someone has a bad race or something went wrong, a bit major, and they've kind of reflected over that. And, athletes tend to say, oh, I'm more determined than ever. I feel great. I'm not that sore. Really, I promise. Do you, I'm always encouraging people to take a week to 2 weeks after anything more than a marathon to a half marathon to a marathon. And for me, it was always the mental side of it as much as the physical, like putting all that effort and energy and love and heart and everything into the race. You need that. Well, in my opinion, I always needed that reset. But would a short break kind of help everyone? Or can some people, can they come back more determined, immediately jump back into training and get after it?
I've certainly seen people who are able to come back that quickly, but I think those are more rare and more unique. I think most people really do need at least a day or two to not just physically take a break, but mentally take a break. And that's a big key. So most people who you are able to convince to take a little bit of a physical break aren't going to do the mental break. They're going to continue beating themselves up. They're going to continue saying, why did this happen? And really, that's not taking a break. That's filling your body with all kinds of negative hormones and chemicals and cortisol. And that's not really helping your body rest and recover. And mentally, you're not feeling any better about it. And so a big key that I'll have people do is it's somewhat of I'll give you kind of a boxed strategy, but it's not necessarily going to work for everyone. But it's taking that time to be upset about it. If something really, I use the military phrase a lot of embrace the suck. If something really did not go well, embrace the suck, acknowledge it, recognize it, value it. It is okay to say that didn't go the way I wanted to. That really sucked. Like, there's a lot of value in that. And so maybe we'll just say a day to just allow yourself to feel the suck. Didn't go the way I wanted it to. And then maybe you take a day, and this is where I use the second part of the phrase. So it's embrace the suck, but don't get stuck in the suck. And that's where I think that's what happens with a lot of people is they get stuck in the suck. And so it's kind of like allow yourself to feel the suck, acknowledge it, but then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to come back better? So I love the idea of I'm going to come back harder and stronger and faster, but what's your plan to do that? If you already had the plan, you would have done it the first time. So take a day, we'll just say take a second day and really kind of lay it out. How are you going to do it? I love the motivation, the discipline, the idea of coming back harder and stronger, but it's not going to happen if you don't have a plan. And so mentally kind of putting yourself in this place. And when I say a plan, I don't just mean a physiological plan, a training plan, but a mental plan. So how do you plan to approach this? What are you going to do about your mindset? What was it about your mindset that maybe contributed to the failure, so to speak, whatever it may be? And what about your mindset can you change? What will you commit to working on to improving that mindset? And how will you do that every day? And so then that might be day 2. And then day 3 is really kind of sitting with that plan, maybe doing some positive imagery of what does that look like going forward? And how will that feel if I am able to do some of those things, and really kind of sitting and resting with that picture of yourself before you insert yourself back into training. Okay,
that's helpful. And then, so with someone who is doing this, and let's say they've been trying for the same goal and they've tried it, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and it just never seems to happen. We're always kind of taught if at first you don't succeed, try again. But is there a point where you kind of need to say, okay, something isn't right here. I need to step away and focus on something else? Or is it purely a case of, like what you mentioned there, you reassess each time? Okay, I'm just going to reassess again. And this might be time number 8, but I'm going to reassess again and see what I can do. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a personalized question as well. Okay. Everyone's going to have a different process for doing that. And I think part of it goes back to, reconnecting with that why again. Why is it that you're really doing this, and what is it that you want from it? And is that feeling as strong, that feeling that we talked about before, is that as strong as it used to be? And if so, then it's finding another way to get there. There's always, we can compare it to golf, where golfers are constantly tinkering. They have one missed shot or one shot that doesn't go the way they want, and they start tinkering right away. And I don't really think that's necessarily the best strategy. I do think that there is a point where you try again. But there's also a point where, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so I think there is a piece of that has to be a little bit intuitive. So each person kind of recognizing something just isn't right. It just doesn't feel right. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to try something a little different and see if I get a different result. And so for that intuitive call, it's really difficult to know when that is. But I think having conversations with other runners, with coaches, with sports psychs, that's where a great opportunity to talk to a sports psych about what's going on. And many times it's a mindset, and it's really just one little mindset shift that needs to happen for things to start going well, or at least for you to start feeling like it's going to go well. And many times, heck, I always tell people, even if that's a placebo effect, if it works, then do it, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it takes to kind of get that little shift can really make a positive impact.
Okay, great.
And so it's somewhat intuitive, but also maybe getting some information if that's what you need until you finally make the decision.
Okay, thank you so much. Very helpful. And, that's something that I've always thought about addressing, but never actually kind of known how to ask about it. And you definitely answered that well. And, related to that, you said working with someone. Let's talk about Headstrong. So you have Headstrong Consulting. Maybe tell us a bit about what it is and kind of what you do if someone is thinking, maybe this is the time I need to work with someone.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So my website's headstrongconsulting.com. It's a company that I've had for 19 years now, I think, something like that. And through time of working with athletes at every level, every sport, the company's grown, which has been really exciting. And so I now have 5 people who work for me in the company. And so if it's something you're considering, something you might just want some more information, go to the website. The first session is free with any of us. So you can go online, you can book a session with anybody in the company, just a time that works for you. We meet people all over the world all the time, so it doesn't matter where you're located. Just know that the time that you schedule online will be Mountain Time. Mm-hmm. And we do Skype, we do FaceTime, we do face-to-face, but the first session's free. It's just a meet and greet. It's a, hey, let's see if this is something that might be helpful for you. And then after that, obviously, we're going to charge. And the price is different based on who you'd see in the company. So we have some people who are newer to the company. We have some people who've been there the longer. And so the price ranges based on that.
Okay. And then so for someone listening, when does, the average recreational runner or the average runner need to start seeing someone? Is this something that everyone would really benefit for, or is it something only if something, you're really struggling and something just doesn't seem to be matching up?
Well, of course, I'm going to say everyone can benefit. Right? Of course. Yeah, right. But really, it's a personal question, right? So are you where you want to be? Are you achieving your goals? Do you think it's a physiological thing that training is going to solve, or is it something that, mentally you're holding yourself back? And many times, I will say our goal with every athlete we work with is to work ourselves out of a job. So we want you to become so mentally tough and so good that you don't need us. And so for some people, that really is just 1 or 2 sessions. They just need an idea of how do I think different in this situation, right? But I have had a number of athletes who've come in and just said, I don't really necessarily have a problem that I'm dealing with, but I know I could be more mentally tough. So how can I build mental toughness? And so we've certainly had a lot of athletes who've come in over the years that way as well. When it comes to performance, you can't really separate the mind and the body. They're both going to contribute and they're both going to influence each other. And so to be the best performer you can be, you really should be working on both.
And okay, so someone listening, thinking about this and saying, okay, that sounds good, but I'm a slow runner, or I'm someone, I don't need it. Like you say the word athlete and I know what you mean, but someone listening who is thinking, well, I'm not an athlete. I run, I'm just an average back of the pack. I run 5 hours in the marathon. What do I really need this? Like, what are your thoughts on level?
Well, hey, if you are active, you're an athlete. If you are a walker, you get up and you walk around the block, you're an athlete. So it's really the way you identify yourself. And if you want to hold yourself back because you identify as not being an athlete, that's your choice. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe, I don't care how slow you go. I don't care how long you take. If you are out there doing it, you're a runner, or you're a walker, or you're an athlete, or you're whatever it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So it's really about that self-identification. So for the listeners, I guess the question would be, are you where you want to be? Are you happy? Are you good with where you are? And if so, that is awesome and more power to you, and keep doing it, because the health benefits, the happiness benefits, it's so wonderful for wellness, overall wellness, to continue being physically active. But for those of you who might want a little bit more and might want to just see what you can do, and maybe you feel like, I don't care, you're 60 or you're 20, but you feel like you want to see what you can do, then it might be worth giving it a shot and seeing how it helps you.
Great. Thank you. And I will put lots of links in the show notes for everyone. So you can go check out Headstrong Consulting, and you can check out other things that Nicole and I have talked about. Before we get on to the Running for Real 4, I just have a question for you on, if you were going to give an Oscar speech, who would you thank? It doesn't have to be Oscar, it can be a psychology award or something. If you had to give a speech, who would be a few people you would thank?
Well, I have to thank my parents, no doubt about it. I always say, my mom was my first sports psych, because she used to come in and give me quotes before games and things like that. And my dad was actually my first coach. So, and he's the one who actually found the field of sports psychology and told me about it. So if it wasn't for my dad, I don't know where I'd be right now in that regard. got to thank my kids too, because my kids are pretty amazing. And as I was saying before, everything I do is for them. They're absolutely tremendous. And then I'd say I've had three, probably more, but three really amazing mentors in my life who have just been there at the appropriate times when I was really, in need of being pushed forward. And those three were really amazing for me. Actually, I'm going to go with four of them. So it would have been Greg Shelley, Ainsley Smith, Keith Henshin, and Barry Schultz. They were absolutely instrumental. And then currently I got to thank my boyfriend, because if it wasn't for Steve, I'll tell you what, he's been really amazing in my life. So it's really good to have him around.
Wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. And I'm sure they'll love hearing that as well, and knowing how much they mean to you. All right, just going to take a moment to thank our sponsor. We'll be back with the Running for Real 4. It's racing season. All those moments of hard work, dedication, early nights are ready to show their worth as race day approaches. For me, though, this was always the time I felt the worst. All those accumulated miles are in your legs, and race day looms, your mind starts to spin into overdrive, wondering, why don't I feel good? And you just don't seem to be recovering. Now, it's hard to overcome, but one trick I had up my sleeve was to take 10 Body Health Perfect Amino. And that allowed me to recover just that little bit faster, enough to convince my mind that I was going to be okay. And after the races, when that soreness leaves you pretty much unable to walk, it was Perfect Amino that I relied on to nurse me back to normal. Well, at least so I could walk normally rather than like I was 150 years old. Now, there was one thing I didn't like about those Perfect Amino tablets, and that was having to swallow 10 in one go. That's no easy feat. But the stubborn runner in me had to do it that way. But now Body Health has created Perfect Amino XP packets containing those 8 amino acids essential to recovery. And as it's a powder, you can add it to any drinks, especially for those moments you can't get a recovery meal in right away. And let's face it, that happens often. Go to bodyhealth.com and remember to use coupon code RUNNINGFORREAL for 10% off. I teased you with it a little bit earlier in the show, and it is now time for me to introduce you to V, my running buddy these past few months, and she gets to know me a little bit more every day. I know she can't wait to get to know you too, so welcome, V.
Hi, Running for Real listeners. It's really great to be with you. I've had a really busy summer, which has been exhausting, but every day I'm getting stronger, faster, and better.
For those of you who don't know V, she is the world's first AI personal trainer. And she lives in a beautifully designed Harman Kardon, aka a really good brand, Bluetooth earphones with aerospace-grade biosensors, which measure your heart rate, speed, cadence, and more. Basically, she's far more accurate than any of the other wearables out there right now. V, what else can you do?
Well, I'm just getting started, but I can help runners find and stay in their ideal heart rate zone so their workouts are more effective. I can also improve cadence, keep track of records, suggest run mantras, and let runners know when their pace is fluctuating so they can correct it on the spot. But ultimately, I just want to boost runners with motivation so they can have a more enjoyable and fun workout.
Avoiding injuries, motivation, and enjoying running more, I don't know what else we can ask for. Thank you, V. I'm so glad you were able to introduce yourself to my crew. And for the listeners, you can find out more at getv.com/running to real, where you can enter to win your own V.
Thank you, Tina. See you on our next run.
All right, Nicole, just 4 more questions for you, starting with I usually say unique nutrition tip. I don't know if you want to give a nutrition tip or something that you like to do just to stay healthy and kind of that you enjoy eating yourself for your training.
Yeah. Well, I've been probably in the past 5 or 6 years, I kind of understood and started valuing organic food a lot more, organic and whole food. And I know that's not really unique by any means, but once I started paying more attention to what I was putting in my body and really focusing more on organic and whole foods, I felt a tremendous difference. And so I'm a really big proponent of eating clean as possible, but don't get me wrong. I still have my chocolate and I still have my chips every now and then. Yeah. No one's perfect, Great. But certainly I think that that's made a big impact on my body.
No, that's helpful. And what about a running for real moment? Do you have anything that you could share that only runners would understand?
Probably. So I went through, yes. And so, I mean, I as I looked at this question, because you'd emailed me this question ahead of time, I thought, oh, I could tell about how I was the conference champ, or I could tell about, different things. And I thought, you know what? No, there's something I think that's even bigger for me. And I would have to say, it was after my second child. I'd had a C-section and was really in a lot of pain, and I had some medical problems associated with that. And then I was ready. Okay, it's time to start running again. I can't wait to get started running again. And then I had a couple of setbacks with some different injuries. And so it ended up being a good couple of years before I was actually able to run again. Mm-hmm. And so the day I went out, I was like, oh, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to do it. Get on my shoes, get ready to go, warm up, stretch, all that stuff. I went out and I did 2 miles. And it was the slowest 2 miles I've ever done in my life. But the feeling of accomplishment that I had after not having been able to run for so long and feeling like I'm back in control, I can do this. That was a high that I don't think I've gotten too many times in my life. Mm-hmm. I'll often tell people who are complaining about running or struggling with running, they'll say, oh, I hate to run. And I just kind of look at them and I say, you know what's worse than not running? And they say, what? Excuse me, you know what's worse than running? And they'll say, what? And I'll look at them and say, not running.
Yeah.
And so once you've experienced not running, that high of starting to run again is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that is wonderful. And thank you for sharing. Obviously a very, emotional and powerful moment for you. So definitely a real moment. And I'm hoping a lot of our audience members haven't had to experience something where they've been out for that long, but if they have, I know they will understand what you're saying. And even, if you've had an injury, which most people have, that takes them out for a month, that's still get a version of that feeling. So, and what about a high moment, maybe in your career that, or, in your running, maybe, that meant so much to you?
I'd have to go with probably high moments in careers now. And it's probably just watching an athlete succeed. And I don't care if it's a 10-year-old kid or an Olympian who just won gold or a professional team who just won the championship, but being off to the side, being in the background and watching that celebration and feeling that energy and knowing that I may have had this small piece in it. Maybe it's this tiny little section, but I had this piece in it. And that moment for me, I have pictures that photographers have taken of me that I didn't know that were being taken of me kind of watching an athlete at the Olympics on the podium winning a medal. And I have this huge smile on my face, grinning ear to ear, and an alligator tear running down the side of my face. And I think that expresses every time I get anything like that. I mean, I'm crying now. Like that's a huge deal for me. And it's really cool to help other people achieve their dreams that way.
Well, and I hope myself, having been that pro and having a sports psychologist on my team, and I can pinpoint her, Evie Saventi, as one of the 3 people in my life who, you say a tiny piece, but I'm betting the athletes that you work with, if they're anything like me, Evie was a third, like easily, like a huge part of it. So thank you awesome. On behalf of what you do for all your athletes, on behalf of them. And finally, what did or do, I don't know when the last time you raced was, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, body language is a big part of what I do. And so I make myself big, right? Yep. I am Wonder Woman. I am hands on hip, chest out, head up, chin up. Yep. I'll tell you what, I look, whether I feel it, I look like the most confident person standing there, right? Yep. And then typically what I'm doing in that moment is I am more of a self-motivational kind of confident. So I'll just say the simple things like, you got this, you're ready, let's do this, go time.
In third person.
Third person, always in third person. Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. And then finally, you said about that pose, you said how much body language means to you. I always ask my guests, will they send me a photo of them in a power pose? Maybe their hands on the hips. Will you send us a photo to put on the show notes for everyone to see?
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, Nicole, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Do you want to tell people a bit more information about where they can find you? We mentioned Headstrong Consulting, but where else can they find more about you?
I'm on Twitter quite a bit. So my Twitter handle is @HeadstrongDoc, D-O-C as in doctor, Headstrong Doc. I do have that same Instagram handle, but I'm just not on there as much as I should be. But you're welcome to go. Every now and then you might get a post. And then my I practice Headstrong Consulting. We also have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and that's under Headstrong Team.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful and so helpful. I am sure people are going to go back to this again and again. And now I have an episode to send people to in the few weeks before their race. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. And everyone out there, enjoy your running, have fun, and enjoy the experience. Because like I said, the only thing worse than running is not running. So enjoy it while you have it.
Love that. Helpful advice, huh? I thought it was about time we broke it down into those 3 parts we tend to obsess over in our minds. And I hope that was helpful for you. So by now you probably know, and I mentioned it on there, that Evie, my sports psychologist, was a huge part of my success. And maybe it's the time for you to take up Nicole on that free consult she talked about. So you can find out more about that through her website, and I'll put links to that in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 33. If you don't want to work with Nicole, although why would you not take up that free offer? You can find out more from her website. You can listen to episodes like this, hopefully over and over again, to remind yourself of those things we talked about today. And hopefully it was a great deal of good advice for you today. I want to thank you so much for listening. That really means the world to me that you are tuning into Running for Real. I know there's so many other podcasts you could be listening to. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.